A Day in the Life podcast is brought to you by the International Myeloma Foundation. We hope this podcast provides messages of hope and resilience for those in the myeloma community and beyond. Today, we are talking to Jill Schock, who is active with the IMF and whose spouse, Jerry, has multiple myeloma. First off, it's nice to meet you today, Jill, virtually at least. Nice to meet you as well. I've heard a lot of great things about you from IMS Vice President of Support Groups, Robin Toohey, who I'm sure you know well. This is the first time for our podcast that we've interviewed a care partner separate from their spouse or partner that they care for. So a little bit of a disclaimer of sorts. We've probably heard this term care partner flying around, and it's something that the IMF recently started to use instead of caregiver, because we believe that a care partner is a patient's teammate. Care partners, as we say, walk along the myeloma journey with their loved ones and help them live well with myeloma. A little bit about my history, since I'm a new person to you at the IMF. Along with my older sister, myself and I, we were care partners to our mother who lived with myeloma for about 4 years. So I have some insight into what it's like to be a care partner. But of course, I've never been one to a spouse. So that's going to be new information for me as well, and probably for our listeners for who it's new for as well, for some of them. So my first question for you is, what do you think of the term care partner? And do you feel that you were a care partner to your husband, Jerry, and why?
Moving from caregiver to care partner, because for us, Jerry and I have approached this as partners, as a team. Mm-hmm. Even though he is the one with myeloma, it still affects me, it affects the rest of our family, and we have partnered through this entire journey. So I really like the word partner.
Excellent. If you can take me through the path that both of you might have gone through when you learned of Jerry's diagnosis.
It started in 2011 with some back pain. He went through some misdiagnoses. He was actually on a trip out in San Diego, and they sent him to the infirmary. He works for the Portsmouth Naval Yard, and he was going for some training, and his back was really bothering him. And they treated it as a severe strain. He was there for 2 weeks. When he got back, it was excruciating. He still continued to work, and it took about a month or so before we finally got a correct diagnosis. His doctor started to see through lab work that his creatinine was up and that he was showing signs of something a little abnormal. So eventually, by about December, after a visit with a spine doctor, we could see the 3 compressions. And he said, well, years old, and a woman, I'd say you probably have osteoporosis, but you're not, and you're fairly healthy. So he performed a kyphoplasty on the 3 compressed vertebrae. And at that point, with that and other markers, it got diagnosed as multiple myeloma. And Jerry and I looked at one another and we said, what's multiple myeloma? Never heard of it. Mm-hmm. So we did a little bit of research, online, which probably is the best idea because you never know if you're getting the tried and true information. Eventually, once we started treatment, we were turned on to the IMF as a good source for resources, which has proved very, very informative. So he went through several rounds of Revlimid, Dex, and Velcade about June, and he was on the list for stem cell process. And he had like a 6-year response with just Dex, a very low amount of Dex for his maintenance. Numbers started to go up again. We obviously are looking at the free light chain, and they decided, let's add some Dex to that. That started to get ramped up. So then he was changed to Pomalyst and Darzalex IV. That lasted for about 3.5 years. And then about a year and a half ago, his numbers started to shoot up, and they wanted to take him off the Darzalex and the Pomalyst. Hoops for that because it hadn't quite been approved. We jumped through all those hoops, and our facility was able to get a grant for us to cover it. And that lasted for about 6.5 months. numbers started to go up again. And then they put him on Sarclisa and selinexor. That lasted about a month and a half. And then finally, when that was starting to not work, our oncologist at Dana-Farber decided to put him on the CAR T list. They put him on Blenrep, and I believe Dex is always with all of them. And that was considered a bridging therapy. And then in August, we started the ball rolling for CAR T. So he had that this past September and is now just monitoring blood counts. The numbers were very, very high last year for his free light, well over 3,500, and now they're about 100. So the CAR T has been amazing. There were so many changes, and it was a little scary, but thanks to a lot of good information, and we have an amazing oncology team and a support team between friends and families. We were able to kind of get through it. We didn't know how involved it was until you take a step back and you look at it and you're like, whoa, I can't believe we just went through all that.
Exactly. So taking you back to the beginning of when he was first diagnosed, what year was that?
It was 2011 is when we started to see, it was December 2011, he got the official diagnosis, but he was showing symptoms as early as late August, early September. So it took a while to get the diagnosis.
And can you recall at that time what it was like for you to learn of his diagnosis? And we talk about the 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then finally acceptance. What was it like for you as a care partner to go through? Did you go through a similar process of trying to accept his illness, or do you recall anything of that nature?
Quoting Jerry, he goes, well, this is the hand we were dealt. Let's play it the best we can. And his attitude really wasn't going to go through a woe was me attitude. And we decided, let's find out about this disease. Let's see what we can do about it and just plan accordingly. So I think the biggest part of the stages of grief that we went through was probably more the bargaining. The bargaining about how, okay, this is our new normal. What's going to change? What can we still do? And move forward, and knowing that we now have a changing landscape, and we'll bargain with that. We'll see what we can do with what we're given. And during different treatments, he's had extreme fatigue. So we didn't go hiking. We didn't go traveling. COVID was a game changer, but the positive thing about having had the stem cell, we were already well versed on how to keep that immune system intact.
Exactly. So I see you have a lot of family pictures behind you. How did you relate the diagnosis to, be it children or friends of the family or relatives, when you went through this life change?
Well, we are a blended family. So we have 5 adult boys that we share, but not conceived together. One of which is, so we both have 2 biological sons, and I have a foster son. And we told them in small groups. We typically, I think we ended up telling my 3 kids because of proximity, and then his kids, it was a little harder to get them together. But we shared with them what myeloma was, what treatment was going to start to look like, and assured them that we're in great hands. We have a great oncology team, and we will keep them apprised. And if we need help with rides, or if we need help around the house, we'll definitely be calling you. And they've been absolutely wonderful. And during COVID, our grandson, one of our grandsons, lives with us part-time. They were so aware, and still aware, that if he had any kind of respiratory illness or viruses, that they, jumped in, and they ended up taking care of him so we wouldn't infect Jerry or myself. They've been very supportive, a little scared, and we have told Jerry's sons particularly to make sure they have gone through some blood monitoring, of which they have done, just to see if there's any markers that are showing up for them.
And was there any relationships maybe outside of the family or friends or relatives that kind of surprised you as their reaction, or that you've had to adjust to? Or
most everybody was really supportive. They took it in stride. Our church members have been sending prayers. Our close friends had been involved with Boy Scouts, and we get together with them an awful lot. They are very supportive. And again, if you need anything, let us know. And all we have to do is call. If we need
That's
a
excellent.
ride, a meal, or I grew up outside of Boston, so driving into Dana-Farber is no big deal for me, but which is helpful.
All right. Right. So taking me through, now you're talking about driving into Dana-Farber, going to one of these appointments, and what is your process like before going to an appointment with Jerry and meeting his healthcare team? How do you prepare for it? What's the meeting like, and what do you do afterwards?
For the week prior to any appointment, particularly we know that numbers are changing, we are constantly writing down questions that we have. So we keep a notebook nearby. So as we're watching TV or just at a meal, saying, oh, gee, I wonder about this. And we both end up with different questions sometimes. So we write them both down. We make sure that the calendar is clear. We make sure that the car is gassed up. We are so fortunate. Most of his infusions have been in our facility, which is only 10 minutes away from us. So we are very fortunate that way. But getting ready for stem cell, we would have about every 6 months to a year, we'd have follow-ups depending on what treatment is going on. After the CAR T, there was a lot of prior to the CAR T and a lot of follow-up after the CAR T. So there were weekly visits down to Dana-Farber. In fact, when we found out about the CAR T, literally we had 10 appointments that week, two days down at Dana-Farber, and then our regular appointments up here. But again, the family jumped in because it would happen to be a week we had 2 grandkids for the week for vacation, and we pulled it all together. So that was tough.
Speaking of things that are tough, if you're willing to share, have there been any sort of financial or legal challenges that you faced along with, or social challenges that you faced along with living with Jerry, living with myeloma?
No, we've been very, very fortunate. Jerry is retired Navy, and he has the TRICARE for life benefit right now because of his age. And between TRICARE and Medicare, or before it was Federal Blue Cross Blue Shield, we have had to pay minimal out of pocket for any of his treatments. Yes, there's an expense when we have to drive down to Boston because there's meals involved and things like that. When both times that he was down for the stem cell and the CAR T, we were gifted our hotel basically both times. So that was like 5 weeks worth of a Boston hotel that got covered through different organizations and friends. Fisher House is an organization that supports veterans going through medical, and they paid for our 2 weeks down there for the CAR T. And we were within walking distance, paid for parking. For the stem cell, a friend gave us some of his reward points for one hotel. And then they came down to visit the day we had to switch hotels. So they drove us over to the other hotel. And between the programs that Dana-Farber provides for hospital stays and an organization here in New Hampshire called Women's Aid of New Hampshire, we didn't have to pay for our hotel the whole time. So we've been very blessed.
How is it coordinating all of that? There's a lot of different organizations that you've been lucky enough to be able to get the benefits for. How's it been to coordinate all of that?
The hospital Dana-Farber did a lot of that, and it was a phone call. I had to call Fisher House, and they took down, the information and the time. They took care of the rest of it. The hotel, staying with the hotels, actually was done through the resource and our social worker through Dana-Farber. So they really helped with a lot of that. So we didn't have to do any of that other than coordinate whether there was a shuttle. Both of the hotels had shuttles to the hospitals. So we were very, very fortunate. However, I have heard other people, for some reason, hadn't been privy to some of those benefits. So if we had had to do it all on our own, it would have been probably as hard as it was getting ready for the CAR T and trying to negotiate, having at one point 4 different grandkids at the house. So
Wow.
that was very difficult.
Well, interesting. So can kind of change the direction here. You've probably read this quote before. IMF's president and CEO and 27-year-old myeloma survivor is Yelik Biru, who you probably have met and know. He often says that patients must learn to live well with myeloma and not for myeloma. So kind of how do you enjoy life outside of all the appointments and treatments, and now that he's on CAR T and seems like he's on pretty low maintenance, but even before that, how did you cope with knowing that he has to undergo all these treatments and you still try to lead a new normal of a life?
Well, the first thing that happened is we cut back on some of our volunteerism. We were very involved with Boy Scouts of America. All of our boys were involved with Boy Scouts, and we continued on and had some great adventures with them, but also were in leadership roles. So we backed off of those responsibilities. We miss it, but we knew that that was the right thing to do. We always make sure that we're doing something fun for ourselves. And that's usually getting together with friends. We love to travel. We'll still do as much traveling as possible. We love to go out and hike. We snowshoe. So we get out and enjoy that whenever we can. Or we also like gardening, so we keep up with gardening. Jerry's actually working part-time for the summers at a greenhouse because he grew up on a farm and he used to work at a greenhouse, and that's his retirement job. And it makes him feel like he's contributing to the community. So we find that's really important as long as we can still contribute, we get back. So we always make sure that we're trying to do that. This past year, every time his treatment changed, we would go hiking. We'd go away for like a 3 or 4 day hike. We'd go to Cascades, or we'd just get out into the woods and we'd explore new places. So we like to keep active. We try to stay active with the family, go to sports events, we had most of the family up for Easter yesterday and did the Easter egg hunt and, those types of things. COVID didn't stop us, even though we couldn't have the family in the house. We did drive-by drop-offs for all the gifts and stuff, and got to, kind of do a standing 6 feet apart for the kids. So give them their stuff. And my husband is well versed with sign language because his 2 sons are deaf. So we do a lot of sign language with folks too. And, we just keep in touch with people. I think keeping in touch with people is key to your healing. Keeps you going. And and I know we'll talk about this later, but being part of the Manchester support group has been an amazing journey and help. And we also like to give back to thank people for the help that they gave us when we were in need.
Exactly. And that you do contribute a great deal, it seems, to your community and of course to the myeloma community as well. And as you touched upon, you are a leader of the Manchester, New Hampshire support group. How did you get involved with this IMF facilitated support group, and what motivates you to be a support group leader?
Jerry found out about it, I think, on the IMF site, where he decided, let's find a support group. And Manchester's about 45 minutes to 50 minutes, sometimes an hour, depending on traffic. And we started going, and we found out that we have one of the other members who ended up being a co-leader as well. We have a mutual friend. So we brought our mutual friend so she could learn about myeloma as well, because now she had 2 friends with myeloma. So we got involved more as participants, because at the time we were still working, and one night a week was enough to drive out to Manchester. And the last couple of years, I'm going to say about 3 years ago, I offered to help out, because it happened to be just before COVID. So very fortunate, because I loved working with technology. The other 3 co-leaders weren't as well versed. And then when COVID hit, I was able to run the Zoom meetings and keep us going. Right now, the two original support leaders have one, her husband did pass, so she's not really involved, but we do stay in touch with her. The other co-leader, who is a myeloma patient, decided to back off. She had a very busy schedule. She did retire. She had another health scare, and she's now the proud grandmother of I think he's going to be 2 now, of a grandson. So they're very busy. And a lot of times too, when you lose members in a support group, particularly if you're the leaders, it affects you. And you have to process and go through those levels of grief. And we have lost 3 people within the last 2 years. 2 from myeloma, but also 1 from an additional cancer, Merkel cell. And they were all very tough because we've become very close friends. And there's a core group that's been together for several years. So Robin did come on our call and helped us with some of that process, and we've been able to do short memorials. We go to the funerals. So we do try to keep in touch with our members that may have dropped out due to death. But it's tough, and you're never quite sure how involved people want to be after their loved one may have passed. So we're very respectful of that. And we kind of follow their lead as to how involved they want to be with the group. Usually they want to stay involved, in touch with the people, not so much learn about myeloma. They're done with myeloma.
I hear that. So what motivates you to give back as much as you do to the myeloma community?
I've always been in some sort of leadership role. I'm a classroom teacher by trade, so I've had to be in charge of 20 little elementary kids at any time. I've been in leadership roles with the Scouts and also in our church. So it was kind of a natural progression. And when the other leaders needed to back off, I was the most seasoned leader. Luckily, we had just picked up a new co-leader who's been amazing, Diana Elsmont-Miller. And she has taken over the role of being the emailer, getting reminders out. Whenever we get information about upcoming webinars. So she is the go-to person to keep everybody informed. And I typically work with Robin and the IMF team to get presenters and plan the meetings. I have no problem running the meetings. But we feel, and Jerry supports this too, that we just want to give back for all the support that we've had when things were tough during this journey. And there have been some tough times.
So that's about all I have as far as questions from me for this interview. Just want to thank you for being a guest. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you want to share with anyone about who might be listening or watching?
My advice to people is to try to look at the silver lining, take one step at a time, celebrate the many victories along your journey, and remember it's a journey. So don't stop walking, just keep going and lean on people when you are ready and when you need to, because they're out there, and the IMF has been a huge support for us. And all we have to do is call somebody and they're there.
Well, all we have to do is call you, because thank you so much, Jill, for all you do for the IMF, for the support group, and for being a guest today on this podcast.
It has been an honor to be able to share our story, and we look forward to looking at some other stories down the road.
Excellent. So thank you to all our listeners. You've been listening to A Day in the Life podcast brought to you by the International Myeloma Foundation. To learn more about the IMF and myeloma, visit us at myeloma.org.